not only do you appreciate just being alive, you appreciate all the stuff that everybody takes for granted daily, the small stuff, a drink of cold water.
Yeah, you said that cold water was
a hot meal. That's the first things when the first 2 or 3 or 4 days you're in Vietnam, those are the things that you start thinking about. Man, I wish I had that cold beer. I wish I had that. You start realizing all the stuff that you took for granted. The simplest stuff. 8 hours of sleep at night, because there was no such thing as 8 hours of sleep at night. The feeling that if you did go to sleep, you're going to wake up the next morning and be alive, because you never knew that. And I brought those appreciations home. Of course, now I do take things for granted again, like the drink of water and the cold beer.
But at least you remember.
But
it's there
you
still.
Never forget it. You never forget it. And when Joe Galloway says, once you see more, you always see it. Well, once you go through a situation where you don't have the simplest things that you appreciate, then you will always appreciate them. I appreciate today. I might take it for granted, but I still appreciate the hell out of being able to have it. And that's what I tell the kids in the
and you can get a 24 pack for $4.
Exactly. And I tell them, I say, you don't want to know what it's like to be. I says, next time when you go home from school today and you open that refrigerator and you take out that cold Coke, think about how everybody that can't do that. Or if you're in a Vietnam situation, you can't get that hot meal. You can't lay down and go to sleep tonight.
So I'm going to challenge you with a question on that. With that lesson that you brought back from a conflict, do you think this is a tough one? Do you think that it would benefit every single person for them to be at least at one point in their life in a situation like a military conflict?
It would benefit them, and I hope that nobody ever has to do it.
That's the crazy thing. This is the thing about war that's been blowing my mind for the 10 years that I've been studying it, like fully, which is everyone who survives it, comes back from it, will always describe how much of a better person it made them, but they would never wish it on anyone else.
And I say it in the classroom. I don't think I've ever gone to a class I didn't say it. As much as I didn't want to go to Vietnam, as much as I hated it when I was there, having been there, survived it, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Nothing. You grow, and I use the term, maybe it's a little bit out of context, but I always use the term. I says it's amazing that how many 18-year-olds went to Vietnam and came back a year later 25 years old. You grew up faster, you died.
As a high school teacher, I can vouch for this. Sending away an 18-year-old, I do it. I'm not a recruiter, but I'm also not someone who turns my kids away from this experience that I've read about. We're not at war. Well, okay. We have conflicts around the world that some of my students are involved in, but for the most part, I could send a kid. Right now, one of my students is in Poland in that exercise we're doing with the NATO against the Russian influence in the area, and I meet him every 6 months when he comes back to the States, and every time I meet this boy who was a complete fuck up in school, just dicked around constantly, which is why I was all for him going in, he came back a grown man even more each time.
You talk about the 10 years or so that I've been doing this. About 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I always get asked, well, what do you get out of going? I don't get paid for it and all that, What do you get out of going to the schools and stuff? And I get a lot out of it. But the one thing, and this lady told me this about 5 or 6 years ago, she said, and she bowls, I bowl on a league with my wife. She came up to one day and she says, I got this friend, and she was talking about this guy that came into her son's high school. It was Armwood, and I was the guy. And she said her boy was so bad, he was a senior. They were actually considering him, sending him to the sheriff's camp and stuff. I mean, they couldn't do anything with him anymore. And he was failing, and it was toward the end of, this was in November when I was at Armwood School, getting the best stage toward the end of the fall semester. he was failing, and they were thinking about during the Christmas break would just send him away.
Pulling him out of school.
They couldn't do anything with him. And she says, and she was telling me this woman is telling her this kid's son or mother was telling this woman who was telling me, and she says he came home one day and he says we had a speaker in our classroom, and I forget how she explained the conversation he had with his mom. He says, "Mom," he says, "I'm going to change." And he explained, blah, 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 something I must have said that sparked something. They didn't send him away. He went back to school in January. And this was in the summer, so he had already went through the graduation process. He never got, for his last semester in high school, he didn't get anything below a C. He came home he was staying out all night long, not coming home, all that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. She said he was home at nights, he studied, he actually managed to graduate, and they said he's going in the military in September or October. And she says if that guy hadn't come into the school and did that talk, she said, I know he'd be in prison. And so when somebody says, what do you get out of this? That's one of the first things, I don't go into that long story explaining it, but that's one of the first things that I think about. And when you're doing it, you don't realize that you had that kind of an influence on somebody. I would have never known this if this lady hadn't come up and said this to me. But,
and it's amazing because war is always described as this horrifically terrible and just never want to have happen thing. And I'm going to say young men. I don't know how young women feel about it, but I think we know it changes you, and I think you assume it's going to change you for the good, but you never know.
Not always
yeah,
the case.
You never know. It's a roll of the dice. But isn't it terrible though that this horrible thing is what can make people better?
Yeah.
It's a catch-22 that.
And like you say, sometimes it's not always the positive. That's where the PTSD and all the others, the suicide rate among veterans is 1 every 20 minutes. That's absurd.
So
the
go
bad
for
part of it is the civilian community can't grasp how in the hell is this possible.
I think the soldiers can't relate to the civilian community. They come home, like you said, and are thankful for that cup of water. And then some kid comes by and be like, my Apple Watch broke.
Oh, yeah.
And as I wear one. But anyway.
Or,
the menial things.
I can understand how it happens. But somebody that has never had any military background, it's inconceivable to them how these things can happen. Or how even PTSD can be a problem. How can it even exist?
Yeah, and you once said, you just described how awesome it feels to help the youth. But you also said that this is probably one of the best things you've ever did for you.
Yeah.
Age 60, I'm going to go talk about this. Yeah. And how did you feel the first day you came home from your first classroom visit? If you remember.
And my wife said the same thing to me. I was amazed. I was really surprised at how receptive the students were. That really surprised me.
Were you still under the impression that we had this aversion to the Vietnam War?
Oh, yeah. And before I did
teenagers forget, really.
Before I did it, I went with John Kiefer, who was one of the first ones to do the presentations. I went to Bloomingdale High School with him and sat through one of his the first one time. And I thought, damn, these kids, most of them for the whole part, like this. And I was surprised.
Do you think, this is a stretch, but for those soldiers still struggling with PTSD, do you think that going out and watching someone else speak first and then they themselves maybe trying to speak, you said you did public speaking because of the staff sergeant.
Well, being a recruiter, you go through that. I was a ROTC instructor at University of Connecticut. You're in front of classrooms.
What would you recommend?
And I tried to, and I know a couple, and I have a good friend, Rodney Franklin. He was in Vietnam, and I mentioned, he says, I'm glad you do that, Don, that's great, blah, blah, blah. And I tried to get him to go to one of them, but
Won't do it.
won't do it. He says, man, that's behind me. I don't want to hear
Well,
about it.
and you also have that story recently of the American sniper who was doing just that same thing of trying to help other Iraq and Afghanistan vets get better, and then one of them goes off the edge and takes him out.
Exactly.
Chris Kyle.
And when I watched that, when I saw that for the first time in the end, I saw how that, because I had no idea how that ended. That was.
Oh, so when you watched the movie, I'm assuming. So when you saw the movie, you didn't know it was coming.
No.
Oh yeah, a lot of us did.
And I never.
Oh, that's
remember
rough.
hearing about that, and then I saw that, and I said, yeah, I can see that. I can see it happening. Because I've talked to him, and Rodney is a good example. He absolutely. I played golf. I used to play golf with him 3 or 4 times a week. And when I started doing these, he said, "That's great, you're doing it. Well, it looks like you enjoy." I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Well, if you want to come, no."
So do you just think we need to find for each human a different way to have this outlet?
You can't deal with. You can't solve everybody's.
Yeah, there's no checklist.
PTSD. There's no book description on this is how you cure this and this is how you. They're all different. What Rodney's problem is not the same thing as what Joe Blow's problem is. The outcome and then what's up here is pretty much the same, but
and we don't know a lot about the brain.
And you don't know it.
Yeah. So in closing here, my final thing, which was this aspect of, what'd you get out of Vietnam? What'd you bring back? We talked a lot about the pros and cons. What's the major thing that your life was changed by your years in Vietnam?
One is you're not going to accomplish anything by yourself. Even out job-wise out here, when you realize if you don't trust this guy standing next to you, and he trusts you, one of you's going to die, more than likely. And you bring that back with you. If I'm going to do something out here, you can probably accomplish it by yourself, but it just doesn't work that way. You learn, and like I say, what you appreciate, and somebody says, why do you do that, or why'd you help this guy do that? Because that's what you'd like to expect, and you're not going to get it all the time. If I'm in a community out here and there's nobody around me that was in the military or something, they don't understand how and why you do some things that you do. A lot of the things that you do for other people and stuff, you do it because you found out that's how you survive. That's how you get through a year of whatever the situation.
There's nothing wrong with help.
Exactly. And sometimes you offer the help and nobody wants it, and you wonder why. But and like I told you, I had a friend, still got a friend that talks about the blacks. And when I was talking with her, and she uses the N word, just like you use ice cream and peanut butter. She said colored. I says, what color was he? And she likes to get pissed. Oh well, yeah. There's a few good ones. And I when I was a teenager, I'd probably said the same thing. But
it's tough to blame kids for parents.
Exactly. And I told her, I says, when I got wounded, I said, blah 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 blah. I says, you know what color he was? Oh, he was. You're going to tell me he was black? Yeah. And I says, like I told you, I says, when I was lying there and somebody came to pick me up, I didn't look to see what color he was, or say, hey, wait a minute, I'll let this other guy carry me to the helicopter.
These are those superficial constructs that we just created through time.
Exactly.
And it's amazing that war removes them. Back to that topic.
And even worse than that is it's sad that it takes war to get somebody to think the right way or to appreciate something. In a lot of situations, it takes a war or somebody going through a year of combat to realize, hey, this is the way you're supposed to be anyway, or this is the way you probably should think anyway. And it takes something, and if you hadn't gone to war, I might still be thinking the other way.
Fear of death is an amazing thing.
Exactly.
Absolutely amazing thing.
That's right.
Well, Don, thanks for coming.
Appreciate it.
And happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Maybe we
it's
can do it
amazing, big
maybe-
70. You don't look a day over 60. I'm not even.
Maybe we can do it again on my 80th.
All right, it's a deal.
All right.
10 years from now on your birthday, the
We'll
morning
do it
of your
again.
birthday, we'll shoot another show.
Okay.
Thanks for coming. And I know there's arguments over whether saying it is even worth it or all that, but thanks for serving in our military for us and protecting us here in the States. For those of us, of course, who did not, because we owe it to you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, folks.